Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I am Tom Baker. I was born in McCook, raised in Hitchcock County, a graduate of the University of Nebraska Lincoln with a degree in agronomy. I also have a teaching certificate in 7th through 12th science. I'm married to my wife Pat, who's with me tonight. I've been married 41 years, 1 month, 6 days, and still counting. Have 3 children, adult children. Our daughter Kimberly, in fact, it brings to mind that Kimberly was on the State Board of Education for 8 years, hearing the candidates talk tonight, and the 2 sons, Jeff, who works for Health and Human Services in Kearney, and Mike, who came back from the University of Nebraska and has taken over the farming operation, who thinks I'm his hired man, but I told him I had to be gone tonight. Reason I'm running for the seat in the legislature is I want to provide an effective and experienced voice for the citizens of District 44. Let me tell you what I don't think this campaign's about, and they're all the same. It seems like it's not a campaign of signs necessarily. There's sometimes a distraction to me. I have to put signs up, and I know a lot of the other candidates have the same feeling. They can also be a safety issue. It's not a campaign about who raises the most money. I filed with the State Accountability and Disclosure to abide by the Campaign Finance Limitation Act, and my opponent did not. We can raise $93,000 for this campaign cycle. I agreed to abide by it. He did not. I'll tell you what it is about. It's about experience and leadership. Experience and leadership. I'm going to run down a few of the things. I know Mike Gonzalez was talking about some of these also, but it's important that you have a wide variety of experience when you go to the legislature. People come to you and they ask questions about various boards you may have served on. I served on the school board for 12 years. Yes, it's a rather thankless job, but you need to understand the process of the Commission on Industrial Relations when you reach impasse with the teachers, how you end up at the CIR, how you go about riffing teachers, not a popular subject if after reduction in force. I hope that doesn't happen. My wife Pat teaches 4th grade in Hitchcock County schools, but nevertheless, you need to have this background, this experience. I served on the Oil and Gas Commission. You say, what does that have to do with the legislature? Well, the oil and gas industry is quite important to southwest Nebraska. You have a lot of employees. It provides a lot of income. And when somebody comes up to you and says, what about the severance tax? Where does that go? You can say, well, it goes to the governor's energy office, $300,000 a year, and so on, etc. You can answer those questions. Once again, experience, very important. After I was in the legislature, I was appointed to the Board of Educational Lands and Funds, and anyone who followed my career in the legislature before knew that I was always interested in school lands and the process of appraisal and selling those school lands, getting back on the tax rolls. I served on that board for 3 years. The other side of it saw that part of the board workings. It's a trust. It administers a $1.5 billion trust in those assets, and you have to manage those. 4 members on the board, or 5 members, I'm sorry, you are actually trustees. You have a fiduciary duty on that board. I learned a lot on that board. I've been a volunteer EMT for 33 years. What does that have to do with the legislature? Licensure, the lack of volunteers in small towns, the difficulty in recruiting new EMTs, the testing you'd have to go through, the continuing education. Once again, a 33-year veteran of EMTs, and I'm still active. Had a meeting last night. I belong to Ag Builders.
Right, you're out of time with your...
Well, Tom, you indicated that you are interested in providing adequate funding for public schools. I guess I would have you expound on that a little bit. The other, if I may, kind of a two-pronged question here, is your relationship with urban senators. We have a real problem of representation in rural Nebraska because of the disproportionate number of senators out here as opposed to in the big city. Can you share with us a little bit?
I can't 3 times as long as the question took to ask. 3 minutes?
This is old times.
The matter of school funding comes up every session. The State Department of Education publishes or puts forth the projected state aid to schools, and there's going to be a public outcry when it's given to the school boards, administrators, the legislature this year, because their valuations have gone up. And what we need to do, I have 2 minutes?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. What we need to do is build a consensus here, because I believe that the state education is going to shift to the east this year, and there you have to work with those Omaha and Lincoln centers and say, we have special needs in western Nebraska. One of them is transportation costs. And secondly, the small schools have to offer a physics class to 6 students, whereas Lincoln East might have 300 students in that same class. Our cost of doing business is higher in rural Nebraska, so we need to get a sparsity factor back in the state aid formula. And I understand the pain school boards go through. Each year you juggle your books to try and get things to balance because of the state aid formula changes, and it's never static. It changes every year, and I'm predicting it will be another battle this year because of the cliff effect of the federal stimulus funds going away and so on. We need to work with those senators, build a consensus, and demonstrate to them that we have unique needs in rural Nebraska.
Oh, no. Thank you. My question, maybe not surprising to you, deals with the state budget deficit. And obviously healthcare is a part of the message that the governor has said to state, the education or healthcare could be a big component, which is understandable. I've heard estimates again up around 800 million. Maybe you've heard others as far as a 2-year deficit coming up. How do you feel this needs to be approached, and what would be some of your focus areas?
Well, let me start by stating that the budget, the out years, what we're talking about here, the budget we'll be developing for 2011-12 is projected at 12% or 10% growth. And the governor has said he's going to present a budget to the legislature with 1 to 2% growth. So we're not going to have that $600 to $700 million deficit, I don't think, that's being projected. Our revenue is growing a bit. Nebraska's unemployment rate is low. Our revenue is a little bit below projections, but the Economic Forecasting Board actually projected revenue growth, which they're pretty close. We're not too far off there. So my name is Thomas, and I'm a doubter. I don't think we have a $750 million budget deficit. I can say this, that I did go through that $750 million budget deficit, and when we had no cash reserve before, we worked through it. It was a mixture of increased fees and taxes. I was one of the 19 senators, though, that voted not to increase taxes, and I think unless the circumstances change dramatically, I would be in that vote again. I wouldn't vote to increase taxes. We're going to have to arrange priorities and create some efficiencies in government, and I believe that there are some of those out there. There's one of them, the constitutional amendment to deal with the treasurer, state treasurer's office. That, for instance, might be part of a piece of the puzzle. So we'll work through it. This is still my opening, though.
You do the rest of your meeting, but you have 1 minute.
1 minute. I brought up my experience on a lot of these boards and commissions. Another one I'm on is the advisory board for NCTA, Nebraska College of Technical Agriculture. A big part of our educational system in southwest Nebraska is there in Curtis. We need to have a basic understanding of what it is they do in their unique role. And water has been brought up. Senator Schrock and I, at the time Senator Schrock was chairman of the legislature's Natural Resources Committee, we worked extensively on LB 962. I see a lot of NRD board members out here. That was what gave them the tools and the direction and so on to begin. Is it a final product? No. There's going to be amendments to that. There was, after we passed the bill, there will continue to be amendments. That's where the leadership parts come in. So the experience is important. The leadership also is important. How we got there with 962 and some of the other bills dealing with water that we worked on before LB 962 was actually passed. And I also want to point out that I was elected chair of the Transportation Committee by my peers. They didn't put names in a hat and draw them out and said, you're chairman. I had to be elected by my peers. So I want to rely on that experience also, the legislative process and serving a chairman with a legal counsel and so on. I think that must mean I'm done.
All right, very good. Well, thanks a lot, Tom.